Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show. Folks, this is Tony coming to you from New Zealand. Today on the show I have Michael Snyder. Now, I've had Michael on the show a few times before, but it's been a very long time, hasn't it, Michael? So it's really great to have you on today. It's a pretty momentous day.
Yeah, it is, Tony. Thank you for having me on. I mean, what a day to be doing this interview when the Dow just, as we're recording this, just closed. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed today down 2,997 points, which was the largest single day point decline in U.S. stock market history. Of course, that just happened on Thursday, where we broke the record. It fell more than 2,300 points, and that broke the record, which was just set a few days earlier on the previous Monday, when the Dow fell, slightly more than 2,000 points. And before that, the largest one-day, single-day point decline in all of U.S. history for the Dow Jones Industrial Average was just 1,190 points. So basically, the first time we broke the record, we shattered the old record by more than 800 points. Then we shattered that record by more than 300 points. And now today, we shattered that record by more than 600 points. So within the past 6 trading sessions, we've seen the worst days on a point basis ever for the stock market. On a percentage basis, today was the worst day since the horrifying stock market crash of 1987. So, I mean, it's truly momentous times. We've never seen the stock market go from an all-time high where it was in February to a bear market faster. It's done that faster than we've ever seen before. So in terms of financially, and of course, people know I write about this all the time on the economicscollapseblog.com. But of course, we're going to talk about all sorts of angles today. But in terms of financial, we've never seen financial shaking this rapid, of this magnitude, really ever before. Basically what we've seen over the last couple of weeks has really been mind-blowing, and it's all because of fear of this coronavirus.
Yep, and I'm a fan of precious metals, and I tell people to hold physical precious metals, have done for a long time, get out of the paper market. I've been saying to people for a while now, and they haven't believed me. I said, look, silver's going to go down to $12.50 or less, and gold will go back down under $1,500. And it's like, that's not going to happen. Well, it did happen last night, and silver went below $12, and gold was down in the 1,400 odds. But this is just paper. Of course, it's disconnecting from the physical market. And that too is being shown up by, even though the stock market's crashing, my friend Chris, who started the A Minute to Midnight thing with me, he emailed me before and says gold mining shares have gone up, are in the green, and some of them in the green big, overnight. So we're seeing a disconnect between the physical and the paper. And I think people have just got to realize that. Don't freak out if you've got physical precious metals and you're seeing this price going down, because there's going to come an other side of this where they're going to absolutely skyrocket. So just hold on to them and ignore what's happening in the paper market, I think. I just wanted to reassure precious metals holders, this is what I've expected to happen. And I've told people for some time, this is how I think it'll happen, and it's happening. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Tony, I think you're right on point there, because right now we're seeing precious metals, especially silver, really tank today in conjunction with stocks, and that could happen some more. However, what we're going to be seeing, as this crisis moves forward, is the Federal Reserve already pushed interest rates to the floor on Sunday. In fact, it was a total panic move, pushed interest rates all to the floor. Now they don't have any more room to push interest rates lower. And then they also restarted quantitative easing, which I'll talk about in a second. And so that was a total panic move. That's really what precipitated the crash in the markets today, because that told everyone, hey, the Federal Reserve is panicking. They've totally run out of interest rate ammunition. Stock market crash. Okay, back to precious metals. So now all the Federal Reserve, what can they do moving forward? Because we're just at the very beginning of all this in terms of the economic ramifications. So what can the Federal Reserve do from now on? All they can do is flood the system with more money and more money and more money. And people aren't going to want stocks, but instead what that's going to do is it's going to cause, as they flood the system with money, it's going to just push inflation throughout our system. So especially things that there's a high demand for, which during this crisis is going to be food, essential supplies, things of that nature. And then as prices rise and people want to preserve the value of their assets, well, they go into precious metals. And that's what happens during the inflationary stage, especially because eventually, I mean, we're going to see tremendous inflation in this country. Eventually down the road, people have seen dreams, visions, and we're going to see things like $10 for a loaf of bread, that type of thing. And so then when you're in precious metals, especially silver, which has the potential to just skyrocket eventually, as you mentioned, because, during the inflationary phase, that's when precious metals, I believe, will really see that tremendous move up in value that so many have talked about. So it's coming. Be patient because it definitely is on the way.
Yes, and what about people that have properties and mortgages? That'd be pretty scary at the moment, wouldn't it?
Well, in terms of if you got an adjustable rate mortgage with interest rates being pushed all to the floor, that actually could be pretty good. And mortgages, in terms of your, how much you owe on your home, that's not going to change. But where people with mortgages are going to get into trouble, well, for one thing, in the short term, we're going to see a housing crash, especially in the big urban areas, because those areas especially are going to become less desirable. So urban area properties are really going to crash like we saw last time in the financial crisis of 2008. Now, where properties will hold their value or eventually, as we get into the inflationary phase of this thing, really escalate in value is in the very rural areas, because people are, as things happen, because this coronavirus is just the beginning, as we'll talk about on this show. A whole series of events is going to start to happen, the perfect storm, and we can talk about all that, where we're going to be hit with one thing after another. So rural values, wealthy people, people with money, that's what they're going to want, rural properties. And so those are going to be the properties that hold their value or actually go up in value. But urban properties there's going to be a massive crash in terms of their values.
Yeah, and you amaze me how many articles you can put out in such a short time, and they're always such good articles, and they end up posted in our Minute to Midnight Facebook group and different things, and you come up with so many great articles really quickly. And you did have one yesterday that was titled, "Did the Federal Reserve Just Purposely Try to Crash the Stock Market?" And put my hand up and go, yes, I actually think that is exactly what's happening. And all the central banks, including New Zealand Reserve Bank, did the interest rate drop, and I don't think it's I don't think it's an accident. I think they know that if they're trying to transition us to a new system, this is it. Crash everything now.
Yeah, it was very odd because on Friday, after the stock market went way down on Thursday, Friday here in the United States, we had one of our best days ever for the U.S. stock market. So there appeared to be no need for an emergency intervention because the stock market was way up. There was optimism. It seemed like, well, that might carry over into this week. So there was no need for the Federal Reserve to come on in and with emergency intervention. In fact, their regularly scheduled meeting was just a couple days away. They would have just waited a couple days and say, okay, maybe we'll drop rates a quarter of a point. We've got things under control. That wouldn't have telegraphed panic. And in fact, the Federal Reserve back on March 3rd, they did the same thing. They did an unscheduled emergency interest rate cut for the very first time since the last financial crisis. And then Wall Street interpreted it as a panic move, and the stocks were way down, as a result. So the Federal Reserve knew that if they did an even bigger emergency interest rate cut and restarted quantitative easing on Sunday night before their scheduled meeting, that it would be interpreted as an even bigger panic move, and markets would likely crash even more, which they did. We just saw the biggest point crash ever. So either the Federal Reserve is completely and totally incompetent, or they're doing it on purpose. And as you said, there's global coordination. So globally, our central banks and the elite that control them, are they trying to crash the markets? Are they trying to create global fear? Are they trying to do something in order, as you inferred, to bring in a new system, to progress the new world order, whatever their policy agendas are? But, to me, this whole thing stinks.
Yeah, I guess I'll mention it just quickly, but I've been telling people since before Donald Trump was even elected as president, and I wrote articles on it and said it in shows. And then just after he was elected, I believe the global economy will crash while Trump's president. And he's been hyping up the stock market all along. Before he was elected, he was saying the stock market was in a big bubble. Since he's been president, it's like, let's pump it up as big as possible. And now the crash is coming. I've expected Trump to be in office when this happens. Now, some people may not like that, but it's not like I've just only started saying it. I've been saying it for 4 years, over 4 years. And I'm seeing it happening now. But this coronavirus is the thing that's caught us all by surprise. I think the way it's happened and the catalyst to push us into this and the fear and panic around it.
Yeah, Tony, and this coronavirus. Of course, a lot of people out there, a lot of believers think, oh, nothing bad can happen while Trump's in office, and really the stock market has become an idol in this country.
Yeah.
And we saw it inflated, and it caused so much pride for Trump and for the nation as a whole. And it was inflated to the most overinflated levels ever when you look at price to earnings ratios, sales to earnings ratios. So I mean, it's like unlike anything we've ever seen before in terms of the stock prices, according to those ratios, were more overinflated than ever before in U.S. history. So they were going to fall at some point. This coronavirus has just been the thing that has burst a bubble, but is way overdue. But in terms of this coronavirus, now, people are, there's still some people out there that are mocking and saying it's not that big of a deal. And we'll see ultimately, is this going to be a pandemic that kills thousands, which it already has? More than 7,000 people around the world are dead now. Or will it eventually become something that kills millions? We don't know. So we're going to watch. But what we do know, Tony, is number one, the Bible tells us what the last days are going to look like. Jesus specifically warned us not so we would fear, but so that we would not fear, because God knew everything that was going to happen in advance. He's in control. He has a plan. He's going to bring this through us. But in Luke chapter 21, and really nobody in none of the big names in the evangelical Christian world are even talking about this, just like people like you and me and kind of the underground remnant is talking about this. But most Bible-believing Christians believe we are living in the last days, right? And in fact, whenever there's an earthquake that happens, people say, oh, earthquakes in diverse places, we are in the last days. Or, whenever there's a conflict anywhere in the world, people say, oh, wars and rumors of wars, we're in the last days. Bible talked about this. But now, in Luke chapter 21, verse 11, Jesus said, there will be pestilences in the last days. And now we don't know if this coronavirus is one of those pestilences, but we should say, hey, we're in the last days. Jesus said there will be pestilences, so we should actually expect this sort of thing, and we should be having this discussion. Now, we'll wait and see if this is one of those pestilences or not, but also in Amos 3:7, we were told, God said that he would do nothing except he revealeth his secrets through the prophets. And prophets have warned, specifically one that I just posted on the mostimportantnews.com, John Paul Jackson. And I posted video of this. He warned while he was still alive, he's warning of this perfect storm that's coming. And one of the things he warned about, he said, there are pandemics coming. He said a pandemic will come. It will be mostly fear, but then one's coming after that that's going to be very, very serious. So we don't know, is this the first pandemic that John Paul Jackson was referring to, this coronavirus, which is going to cause a lot of fear, and then something else is coming after, which is going to be even worse? Or was, for example, we've had that Ebola scare a few years ago. We've had some different scares along the way, which caused fear, but really didn't do anything. So we don't know, but we do know pandemics are coming, pestilences, and we do know that John Paul Jackson and others have warned about them. Now, where does coronavirus fit into that prophetic picture? We don't know yet, but what we have seen is cases have escalated dramatically all over the world. And now what we're seeing, Tony, is we're seeing a shutdown all over the Western world, which is absolutely unprecedented, which is going to tank our economy, whether this becomes a pandemic that kills millions or not. The fact that we're shutting down, and the CDC just announced yesterday that they recommend all public gatherings of more than 50 people be canceled or postponed for at least 2 months. And so there's going to be no sporting events, no concerts, no conferences, and all over the country, we're seeing schools shut down, restaurants shut down, bars shut down, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on. And basically, the United States and all of Europe is shutting down for the foreseeable future, which is going to completely tank the economy, which whether this is going to be a super deadly pandemic or not, in the short term, I can't really think of too many things that would cause a more immediate and more severe economic collapse, total economic collapse, than basically shutting down society for the foreseeable future all across the Western world.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, airlines, how are they going to survive this? Air New Zealand are cutting their long-haul flights by 85%, long-haul flight capacity by 85%. I've seen American Airlines, big things like that. All the airlines, how are they going to survive this? I guess Air New Zealand, being at least half owned by the New Zealand government, may get through this one way or another. But some of the other airlines, will they? The ones that don't have the government backing, or will the governments bail them out? Hotel chains, how are they going to survive? A lot of them, all of this sort of thing. And so it's like dominoes. Once that first domino falls, it's taking all the other ones down. And I agree with you. It wouldn't matter if the coronavirus almost disappeared tomorrow. I think the damage is done.
Yeah, and the longer this shutdown lasts, the more severe the damage is going to be. But yeah, hotels, cruise ships, anything having to do with tourism or traveling, just absolutely devastating. The White House is now talking about, well, which industries are we going to bail out? I mean, we're already $23 trillion in debt and counting. We've already been pushing the debt accelerator all the way to the floor, adding more than $1 trillion to the national debt here in the United States during the good times, and now we're going to have to bail out all these industries, and basically they're not going to be able to bail out everybody. Yeah. And as businesses fail, their debts are going to go bad. That's going to hurt the banks, and then the banks are going to get in trouble. Like you said, it's a domino effect. It's going to happen very, very rapidly. We're already how it's going to hit normal people is people are going to lose their jobs. Yes. Already. People that work in restaurants in New York City losing their jobs. People that worked on Broadway are complaining on Twitter because they're losing their jobs. They're like, who's going to pay our bills now that you've shut down our Broadway plays? Who's going to pay our bills? All across the country, people are losing their jobs. And a lot of these restaurants, that are being shut down all over the country, a lot of them are small businesses, family businesses, and are barely scraping by. So you shut them down for a couple months, they're never going to be able to reopen. They're going to go completely bankrupt, flat broke. And so, people are going to lose their businesses. And then once again, because people aren't making a living, they're not going to be able to pay their mortgages. We're going to see another mortgage crisis, just like 2008. So we could talk about dominoes upon dominoes upon dominoes all day, but we're not. If this thing stretches on, and right now it's going to be at least 2 more months because of the new CDC guidelines, potentially even longer, we need to remember the Spanish flu pandemic lasted for 3 full years, January of 1918 to December of 1920. So if this thing continues for months into next year or even longer, we are talking about an economic collapse, not just a recession, but a depression beyond anything any of us have ever experienced before. And it's not just going to be one part of the world, but literally globally. And this comes at a time when we've already been seeing armies of billions of locusts eating crops all over Africa, the Middle East, into Iran and India and China. We've already been seeing crop failures all over the world. In fact, Australia just had their worst harvest ever recorded in all of history because of all the drought and everything. Usually they export lots of wheat to the rest of the world. Now they're importing wheat. All these massive problems with food production leading up to this, and now this hits. I mean, we're setting the stage for so many of the prophecies that you and I and others have been warning about, where we're setting the stage for famine, we're setting the stage for economic collapse, we're setting the stage for armed guards on food trucks, we're setting the stage for civil unrest, riots, for martial law being imposed in major U.S. cities. Basically, you can tick off all the lists, all the prophecies, all things that we've been warning about for years and years and years and saying, get prepared, get prepared. People have been mocking us. It's upon us. It's here. And this is just the beginning, Tony.
And, the mainstream churches with their prosperity gospels and their feel-good messages, all too blind to see this coming. And they mocked us, and I know pastors and things that have basically, mocked people like me and you and they've been too blind to warn people, and now this is upon us. And New Zealand, you know, our government's just said anybody coming to New Zealand, whether it's a New Zealander or a foreigner, has to self-isolate for 14 days. That's just instantly killed the tourism industry in New Zealand, and tourism is New Zealand's #1 industry. So how's the tourism industry going to survive? We're a small country, but, you know, are we any safer here than other places? I don't know. I guess only time will tell. Of course, a lot of the elites have escaped here, but I just think I just can't see how this goes away. It's just, like you say, it's just going to escalate. And then what happens when it hits the derivative market?
Oh, I know. We've been warning about derivatives for so long, and we're already starting to hear some rumblings. And that's the thing. The derivatives marketplace is designed to function during normal times, stable times. When things start swinging really wildly, like we saw in 2008, the thing that caused so much of the bailouts was a derivatives failure. That's what caused so much of the massive bailouts. And now it could be far worse. We didn't learn our lessons from the last time around. We didn't fix the structural problems. And so it's going to cause a tremendous amount of fear. But you mentioned the elite are flying off to New Zealand. We're seeing that, you know, the booking of private jets has just gone through the roof. The elite are getting out of town. We've seen quite a few CEOs resign over just the last several weeks. Major CEOs, people stepping down from corporate boards, people stepping down from their positions because they can see what's coming. They're like, time to get out of Dodge, time to get out of here. But for the rest of us, we're kind of stuck where we are. And at this point, even right before I came on the program, San Francisco said, hey, it's time we're ordering you to shelter in place. Nobody go out except for essential things for, basically the foreseeable future. So, I mean, it's come upon us so suddenly that a lot of people are going to be stuck at home without many supplies, without being prepared. I mean, we've seen some panic shopping. Stores have been running out of toilet paper, this and that. But people run out and fill up their carts once or twice and bring it home. That's not going to last you very long. If you've not been preparing all this time, and now it's come upon you suddenly, you're stuck at home. What are you going to do? You're going to start running out of stuff really quickly if you have not been preparing all this time. So, I mean, Tony, it's come upon us very quickly. It's caught a lot of people by surprise, but it's here.
And I had a lot of comments on our YouTube channel at times when I've told people to prepare. A lot of people that listen have been preparing and do believe it, but there's always been those comments, I don't understand you people, preparing, you're not trusting God and so on and so on, and basically saying they shouldn't do anything and prepare. I guess they're probably still buying new iPhones and maybe a new boat and stuff like that because that's more important to them. So then they come down hard on us that have said prepare. The point is, it's like, this is it, folks. If you haven't prepared, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And I don't know what a lot of people are going to do, and a lot of people are going to go out to the stores. And at this point, if you're going to the stores in the United States, especially in the major cities, that's going to be one of the best places to catch the virus, because that's going to be one of your central hubs where thousands upon thousands of people are going through, coughing on everything, breathing on everything, passing it to one another. So if you want to catch the virus, going to these big stores is a really good way to do it at this point. So at this point, I'm telling everyone, avoid the stores if at all possible, because you don't want to be going there. You don't want to catch this virus. And yeah, most people that get it end up surviving, even though at this point it has a higher death rate than the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 to 1920, which ended up killing more than 50 million people. But most people are going to survive. But people that have survived have described weeks of blinding pain. I don't think you want to go through that. And then if it gets into your lungs, doctors are saying it could cause permanent damage to your lungs for the rest of your life. So this is not a virus that you want to mess around with. But, a lot of people are going to ignore the warnings anyway, and they're going to do what they're going to do.
It's interesting, though, looking at the death rate and different things. So far in New Zealand, we've had 8 cases, confirmed cases, and 2 possibles or probables, they're saying. 8 confirmed ones. None of them have been serious. Only one of them ended up in hospital, and that was only for a short time and then was sent home. All the others are saying, they're fine. They're hardly... So this is weird to me. Something's really strange here. And then you got South Korea with a very high infection rate, and yet their death toll is under 1%. Then you compare that to Italy, which is going ballistic with people dying. It's like I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. How come there's such a huge discrepancy between these different places? And I wonder, well, what's the percentage of smokers or old people that smoke or whatever? Is there a lot of people in Italy that are old and smoke and it's killing them, or what's going on? It's really hard to figure out.
Yeah, and they've talked about how in Italy there's a higher percentage of older people in the population, and that is true. And so that could be a factor. But the scientists have also talked about the fact that there's more than one strain running around. In fact, there was a headline on Drudge Report not too long ago about it. And one strain appears to be much more deadly than the other. So it was South Korea hit by the less deadly strain, and is the more deadly strain raging throughout Italy? I mean, in Italy, you look at the number of people that are dead compared to the number of people that have recovered. You know, it's the number of people that have recovered is a bit ahead of the number of people that have died, but not by too much. And so that moving forward, if that rate continues, that would suggest a very, very high death rate in Italy potentially as we move along. So we'll watch this very, very carefully. And this virus could continue to mutate moving forward, scientists have said. So we'll see, Tony, but it appears that some areas are being hit by potentially a more severe strain than others.
Yes, it certainly, I suppose in some ways it's too late for people to do major preparations physically. There's still things you can do, like I've noticed some of the things that are cleared out of shelves and other things aren't, that could be useful that people haven't cottoned on to yet. So people could pick up those things that are not so sought after that could still be very useful for surviving and all that. But boy, it's really time to put our faith and spiritual preparedness fully into action, I think.
Oh, it's true. And spiritual preparation is the key because, already we're seeing this on the internet. I know you're seeing it in your Facebook group and all over. People are responding very emotionally. Some people are in denial. They don't want to believe this is serious. They don't want to believe this is here. So they're lashing out in anger as a way to kind of cope with this. Other people are giving into depression, fear, but God doesn't want us to fear. He doesn't want us to be depressed. And so we are seeing a wide range of emotions, and it's going to get worse because let's talk about the bigger picture, Tony. We need to be strong, and this is not a time for fear. In fact, God did not give us a spirit of fear. We are not to be afraid, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. God's been warning about all of this and everything that's coming for a very long time, so that we would not fear. Yes, so that we could get prepared. One of the reasons God warned us so we could get prepared, but it's not out of fear because we plan to stick around for a while. There's a lot of work to do. The greatest hour for the people of God is ahead. In fact, I believe the greatest hour for the church of God, for the remnant, is here, and and very exciting times are coming. Miranda and I are very excited about what's ahead. But in terms of looking forward spiritually, Tony, people need to understand a little more than a decade ago, John Paul Jackson first came out with his major warning about the perfect storm. And at the time we were going through a financial crisis, things were not good. But he said, most of what I'm telling you is not for right now, but it's for about a decade from now. And now here we are, right on schedule, about a decade from when he first issued that warning. And he said there's going to be a perfect storm. And he warned about a pandemic, as I talked about earlier. But he also said there's going to be governmental shaking. There's going to be geophysical shaking. We're going to see natural disasters. There's going to be wars and military conflicts, economic shaking, and all the things kind of encompassing all what the prophets all over the world have been warning about, men and women of God, with dreams, visions, revelations. God's warned well in advance to countless people. We've been documenting this for a very long time, and now we're at that time, perfect storm. And people say, well, why don't we just pray it away? Well, if this is the judgment of God, and God's warned about this is coming for so long, America had so long to repent, has not repented, no repentance. Instead, we continue to race into our sin. The judgment of God was going to come, And so people shouldn't be surprised. But basically, this perfect storm, John Paul Jackson described it as one thing after another. So just when you think one thing is maybe we're getting past it, it's going to be another thing and another thing. And they're going to be one on top of another, feeding into one another, and making each crisis worse, because they're our eyes on one thing, then boom, California is going to be hit by a major earthquake, then boom, our eyes on that, then some economic thing is going to shake, or a war is going to erupt in the Middle East, or all these things we've been talking about. So Tony, people need to understand, we're not just going to go through this coronavirus, then it's going to be over, then lives are going to go back to normal. No. It's going to be one thing after another, escalating, getting worse, eventually getting to the point where America is brought totally to her knees, the judgment of God coming upon this country, and countless people are going to die, both in the United States and all over the world. And we're leading into the time that the Bible, the book of Revelation, has talked about the end times, the last days, and ultimately down the road, Jesus described it as the worst time in all of human history. There's never been a time like it before, never will be a time like it after. That's what we're heading toward. So this is just kind of the warm-up act. This is just the very beginning. And people need to understand that and once again, I'm not telling this to you so you can be afraid. I'm telling about this so you can know God knew all about this in advance. He's in control. He has a plan. In fact, he has a plan for your life. Now, the plan for your life, if you're watching, might be radically different from what you thought it was going to be. Maybe you thought your future was about your career, your 401k, your plans, your ambitions, the things you've accumulated, your money, maybe your future is going to look totally different from what you expected, but it's going to be better than you expected, because if you embrace God's plan, because God has a plan for you. So don't despair. Don't be depressed. Don't get angry. God is interrupting human history. He's going to do things his way. He's bringing judgment, but also in the midst of judgment, there's going to be a great harvest of souls, and we can be part of the greatest move of God in the history of the world if we don't sink back, feel sorry for ourselves, sink into despair, and embrace what God is doing in this hour.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I know there's people to say with the coronavirus, there's a fair bit of very interesting things have happened, like that the book, Eric Coons, I think, the Wuhan 400 would be released about 2020. This is a book written in 1981. And things like that. And then there's, I think, a video from 2010 where a guy was talking about how there was a, what's it called, Anglo-Saxon mission, I think it was called, and they were talking about releasing a pandemic on China that would be like China catches a cold, and that would be then spread around the world, but it was to depopulation and all that. So people are saying, see, it was man planned it, and this, that was a man-made virus from the lab, and I think it probably was personally, but it's almost irrelevant, because once it's released, you can't stop it just like that, whether it was a man-made one or not. And so all of these things, and then people saying it's 5G, and I'm thinking, well, no, this isn't 5G. Maybe 5G helps people's immunities become weaker so they're more susceptible to it, but there is a real virus, and people need to actually realize, hey, this is worse than your normal flu.
Oh, I agree. This virus is real. And I find it very suspicious that it first appeared in Wuhan, because Wuhan is the only place in China that has the highest level biosafety lab. The only such lab in China is in Wuhan.
Yeah.
And it was a short distance from where they said it originally originated, that particular market. So I'm personally inclined to believe that it escaped from that high security lab, and then it got loose in the population, and then here we go. So I totally agree and believe that it was a man-made virus. Now, some people, of course, now the Chinese are starting to say, The Americans did it. In fact, Chinese government officials are coming out and saying, hey, this is a U.S. bioweapon. And some Americans believe that. And we don't know. We have our theories, but ultimately it has gotten out. But the thing with the United States and China blaming each other back and forth, this is another thing which is raising tensions between our two nations, which we've already seen relations because of the trade war and everything else, relations between our two countries deteriorate, setting the stage ultimately for military conflict, which people have talked about, United States on one side, China and Russia on the other, down the road. That's another thing that's coming. So, it's interesting to see how all these pieces are starting to fit into puzzle. But now this is out, you're right, ultimately, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to prove where it came from, but it's here. And it's interesting because another John Paul Jackson prophecy, and I'm going to be posting about this hopefully later today on themostimportantnews.com, where he said there's going to be an epidemic coming, which is going to start in another country and come to the United States. So that would fit with this one where it started in China and has now come here. So it's interesting how all these pieces are fitting together, Tony. And, let's pray. Let's pray for God's mercy. Let's pray this will go away. But if this is God's plan, if this is God's judgment on America, then we're not going to be able to stop it. And ultimately, people, if people are, why would God judge America? Well, more than 60 million dead babies since Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973. We've got gay marriage in this country. The 2/3 of the country now approves of gay marriage. President Trump has come out, endorsed gay marriage, and he's actually initiated a federal government program trying to legalize homosexuality in every country on earth. This is supposed to be our Christian president. This is supposed to be a Republican president. If the good guys are doing this, the whole country's gone. And Tony, I also find it very, very interesting. If you go back to late January, and a president at that time, the virus was spreading in China, but it really wasn't a concern in the United States. It wasn't really on anyone's radar. And President Trump and all those leaders got up and they say, we've got a plan to divide the land of Israel, right? And throughout the last several decades, every time there's been a push to divide the land of Israel here in the United States, we've seen some kind of major disaster come every single time. And I've documented this. And so we haven't learned our lesson. We did it again. So I watched. I was like, well, what's going to happen? Right. So first couple of days, nothing seemed to happen. But now, look, we've got the biggest disaster of them all with this coronavirus pandemic. So is there a connection? I don't know. But this is something you don't do. You don't try to divide the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Another thing that is potentially bringing judgment. Of course, the list could go on and on all day, where there's about as much divorce in the church as there is in the world, about as much teenage pregnancy in the church as there is in the world, about as many men watching porn in the church as in the world. We've got just sexual sin running rampant, according to the CDC. We've got 110 million Americans with a sexually transmitted disease, and greed, corruption. The list goes on and on with our sins, no repentance. And so it was inevitable that judgment was going to come on this country.
Yep, and Donald Trump called for a national day of prayer, but not a national day of repentance. And it was basically, whichever God you believe in, just pray to that God, which is like, yeah, right, that's going to do a lot of good. It's sort of, it's a token gesture. I'm also thinking, though, back to coronavirus, there was the event 201, the pandemic practice exercise in October last year, and boy, are we seeing that playing out now. It's like it was like they laid out a blueprint for how they were going to handle this thing, explain to everyone how we're going to do it, control the media, and so on and so on. I don't think it's a coincidence. Again, to me, it points to probably a deliberate man-made virus, maybe released on purpose or maybe by accident, but it's just that timing of that. I don't know if people have watched it. It's quite long, but there's some real key moments in that event 201, the conference that they held, which is like, yeah, right. So to me, it's just too many coincidences for it to be coincidence. And so, yeah, but here we are. And whatever the story is, and we'll probably see lockdowns, I think, within individual states, maybe in America as well. You won't be able to get in and out of different states. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but I have an ex-Freemason source who emailed me today and said all the high-level Freemasons in his town have gone to the hills to their safe places because they have safe places. So he said they've gone. Of course, he's been left behind because he's not a Freemason anymore, but he's got relatives that are. And so it's like they know, or they're in on it and on the whole scheme, and it's unfolding very quickly. So what do we do, Michael? What do you want to tell people to do? What's the main thing, if you were to put one most important message across?
Oh, boy. There's so much, Tony. In terms of physically, in terms of preparation, I just can't recommend people go to the stores. Of course, you don't want you and your family to starve if you don't have any food. If you get to a point where you don't have any food left, you're going to have to go get some food. But man, there's such a high chance you're going to catch the virus if you go to the stores. You can still order things online. In some areas, you can use an app. You can order online, and then they can bring it out to you in the parking lot. Which would help to minimize the risk. But of course, the guy bringing it out to your vehicle could have the virus, and then the packages that you're getting could have the virus. So anything you want to handle with extreme care, wearing gloves. And then once you bring something to your home, isolate it for at least 7 days, probably longer. Because the virus can survive on surfaces for days. It can hang in the air. It passes from person to person so easily. It's so risky to go out there and get anything at this point. Even ordering on things, anything from Amazon, well, it's got to come through the mail, and then you've got to isolate the package. Just use extreme caution with whatever you're buying, whatever you're purchasing, whatever packages you're receiving, because it's so easy to catch this virus. So, people mocked us for preparing, but as you just mentioned, Tony, the elite have been buying their bunkers, buying their places in New Zealand for years. And I've written about this for so long. The elite have been preparing for a long time for something like this. Now they're going to their bunkers. They're going to their places in New Zealand, and all of you out there that have been mocking. Now you don't have anything. What are you going to do? So, in terms of what I would encourage people to do is, if at all possible, stay home. If your schools have not been shut down, pull your kids out of the schools. As if you get this, especially older people, because we've seen around the world, older people, the death rates for people 60, 70, 80, it's just very, very high. So especially if you're in those higher age groups, or if you've got a compromised immune system, you want to stay as far away from this virus as possible. You're going to want to stay home. And it might be months. And most people don't have months of food or supplies. But that's what I would recommend doing. Stay home. Some people out there, I'm just going to pray and I'm just going to quote Psalm 91 and walk around. I'm not going to be afraid. Well, that might work for you. But if you're in sin, you better go hide in your closet. That's not going to work for you if you're in sin. If you're in sin, you better go into your closet and pray for God's mercy. But stay home, ride this thing out. And seek God, pray for, if you need help, if you need something, seek God's help, pray. Small groups and communities could potentially help one another as long as they're isolating themselves from the, but it's so hard because you never know, has somebody else been in contact with somebody that's been running around? It's so hard. It's so hard. Me and Miranda, we're going to be staying home. That's what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future. But in terms of spiritually, we need to seek God like never before. We've got to get closer to God than ever before, because the times that are coming are going to be breathtaking. They're going to cause all of us to become very emotional at different times. Even in recent days, my wife and I, there have been moments that it's like, whoa, we see some headline that's, it takes your breath away. So we need to seek God, get closer to him. Really, the time for physical preparation, Tony, is over. Like I said before, do not fear. But see, a lot of people are saying out there, do not fear. And what they mean is ignore this, walk around in public like normal. Don't be concerned about the virus. The virus is not a threat. That's not what I'm saying at all. The virus is real. It is a threat. It can kill you. If it doesn't kill you, it can cause you weeks of blinding pain and permanently damage your lungs. You don't want that. So yeah, pray for healing. Pray for healing for those that get sick. Our God is a healer. He does supernatural things. God does supernatural things through us. So we believe in healing. We believe God is going to heal people that we pray for. But that doesn't mean we're going out trying to catch this virus either. And most people out there, most believers out there, most of the church is in sin, first of all, so they're not going to see anything supernatural happen. Secondly, most believers in America aren't walking in the supernatural, and so they're very, very vulnerable to this thing. So in terms of my advice for most people, stay away from this virus.
And also, I agree with that. Look to do things to build up your immune system as well, so that if you happen to be one that does catch it, you've got a much better chance of being hit less by it. There's a lot of ways you can build up your immune system. I won't go into them here. We've probably covered that in some other videos and things, and maybe will again. But, yep, look at building up your immunity as well. So, yeah, Michael, can you tell people your websites again? I know you've got several.
Yeah, I do. The one I'm most known for is theeconomiccollapseblog.com. If you could just go to Google and type in the economic collapse, it's the first result that comes up. I mostly focus on economics on that website, although I'm writing about coronavirus constantly everywhere these days. I've also got endoftheamericandream.com, focuses on a wider variety of issues. But if you want to find all the articles gathered in a single place, along with all the prophecies I post, the things I just shared about John Paul Jackson in this program, you can watch video of him giving that first prophecy I talked about on themostimportantnews.com, or if you just type in the most important news into Google, you'll find it. But it's the mostimportantnews.com. And if you've got things, you're aware of some prophecy that was given about a virus coming or anything like that, email me. You can email me at the economic collapse blog at hotmail.com, or you can go on a Facebook, find me, Michael Snyder, on Facebook. You can contact me through Facebook, contact me there. You can find me there. And then if you're interested in getting my books, particularly I would commend The Rapture Verdict. It's about the end times, the last days, the things we're heading toward. It's a very, very important book in this hour. It's called The Rapture Verdict. You can find it on Amazon.com. But once again, I would recommend getting the ebook version, because getting the hard copy, anything you get, any kind of packages, you have to handle with extreme care. So probably get the ebook version. But I just encourage people to reach out to me if they've got concerns, if they want to talk, whatever, if they need prayer. But I think I just about covered it there. But more than anything else, I just encourage people, hey, just because life is changing doesn't mean your life is over. We're just entering a new chapter, and it's going to be a great chapter for the people of God. But people have to realize that things are going to get a lot worse, but don't despair, because God's in control and he has a plan for you, okay? So do not fear. But you need to pay attention to people like Tony, pay people attention to people like me, who have been warning all this time that these things are coming. And so listen to the people who had the wisdom to warn you in advance, and we can help guide you through the next steps that are coming.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, well, I want to say thank you very much for being on the Minute to Midnight show again, Michael. It's been great to have you back after such a long space between the last time we had you on. It's a shame it's such a difficult time that we're going through, but yeah, I think you've said a lot of important things today.
Yeah, and I apologize for not being on for a while, but there was a time that the Lord, I believe, wanted me to step back for a while, and then you contact me. I said, well, Tony, let's wait until global events start really accelerating, because I knew they were going to. In fact, I told people in advance, hey, I have more of an ominous feeling, more of a concern. The Lord is weighing on me about 2020 more than any year ever. In fact, we've been hearing warnings about 2020 specifically for a very long time, and so we were anticipating anticipating this year was going to be a blockbuster, and it has been. And so, and now, the Lord is freeing me up, and he wants me to be out here talking to people, warning the people, because his warning message needs to get out here. And people are finally in a place where they're going to be receptive and hear, hey, it's time to repent, get right with God. It's time for the army of God to, because the remnant's rising. God has big plans. In fact, things are going to happen that people wouldn't even imagine are going to happen positively, even in the midst of all the chaos and darkness. And God has big plans for the remnant, but most of the church has not been listening. But hopefully now people will start to listen.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a great interview, and yeah, it's been awesome. Hopefully we'll have you back again before too long if you can find the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tony.
Folks, don't forget minutetomidnight.com is where all of our shows can be found, as well as on iTunes and YouTube. And we have a forum on the Minute to Midnight website as well, which you may want to join, and a Facebook group. Please give this a thumbs up and share it. A Minute to Midnight is run 100% by donations. I really want to try and keep this going as long as possible. And I know it's getting tough for everyone. If you're able to help by donating to keep A Minute to Midnight running, that would be just hugely appreciated. This is the only way I survive. It's a full-time job. So if you can donate to A Minute to Midnight, that would be a big help. We don't know how much longer of a window we've got to have websites like this and YouTube channels and so on, but I definitely want to keep it going as long as we are possibly able to do so. So appreciate your support. The music used in the shows I've written, played and recorded, and you can also download free music on the website if you want as well. So folks, be safe, and God bless, and God willing we'll be back with another show in a few days' time.